Hi, I'm Amanda Webb, and welcome to Her Time, Her Place. This is a podcast about women stepping into their moment, owning their place, and sharing what it really took to get there. In each episode, I'll sit down with women from all walks of life to explore the turning points, the moments of doubt, the decisions that changed everything, the people who showed up, and the lessons they've carried forward. Because so many of us have been told, or have quietly told ourselves, that it's not the time, it's not the place, not yet. This podcast is all about questioning that, choosing it anyway, and discovering what's possible when we do. Let's go. Hi, I'm Amanda Webb, and welcome to Her Time, Her Place. Today, I am thrilled to have Sonia Casanova, the CEO of Dress for Success New South Wales and ACT, as my guest for episode 2. For full transparency, I have known Sonia for just over 2 years. And the reason I have had a chance to get to know her over that time is I was actually involved in her recruitment in my capacity as a board director at Dress for Success. I know a little bit about her from my 2 years of working with her, but today I am looking forward to exploring and finding out some other things about Sonia and her journey. So, Sonia, welcome to Her Time, Her Place.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much for inviting me and taking the time to sit down and have a chat. It's really lovely.
Yeah, it's a different kind of way for us to be conversing.
It sure is. Normally we snatch conversations here and there, but to actually set aside some time for a wide-ranging conversation is going to be really lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of nice because if anyone's listened to episode 1 with Diana Ryle, at the very end of her episode, she spoke about her early involvement with Dress for Success. So this feels like a perfect segue that episode 2, we have the CEO of Dress for Success currently joining us.
Perfectly timed.
So, Sonia, this time is going to be about you. I'm really curious to know some of the early story from you and how the concept of Her Time, Her Place has landed for you. So, can you take me back on the Sonia Casanova journey from then until now?
I wondered where to start. When you're a young child, those years that you spend as a child at school with your family, with the people around you are so formative, but that's probably going back a little bit too far. So let's not go quite that far back. But I guess when I think about stepping into the workplace, that's kind of where I go back to, because that really changes the way you interact with the world when all of a sudden you have the responsibility of being in the workplace and being an employee. And I was so fortunate to be studying at university. So my undergraduate degree was actually in tourism management because I loved travel and I loved visiting, other places and wanted to see more of the world. And so tourism management seemed like a really great idea. But remembering also that it was early to mid-90s when I was doing tourism management and the economy wasn't great. And I remember being at university and realising that actually a job wasn't guaranteed for me when I finished university. And then along came the Sydney Olympics. And I was studying tourism management at UTS along with kids who were doing human movement and leisure studies and what have you. And that really changed everything for us because all of a sudden it was like, wow, we're graduating next year and there's jobs for us. So it was a pretty exciting time. I was doing a work placement and was offered a full-time job. And I had to make the decision to finish my last year of university part-time while I was working full-time. And I was 22. I'm really glad I did that because I ended up leaving university with a degree and 2 years of work experience by the time I got out of uni. So that was a fortuitous moment. And now if I look back, it's a benefit of saying yes. Because I wasn't sure that I should do that, but it was a benefit of saying yes. Most of my friends finished uni a year earlier, but they didn't have jobs. So, that was interesting and that was a lot of great fun. But I then moved into financial services. And so I'd moved kind of from tourism management into more of a marketing and comms role and then moved into the financial services sector. And that was entirely different to the tourism sector, far more conservative, far more traditional. I worked for a US-based company with their first overseas office in Australia. And that was also interesting because up to that point, I had thought that American and Australian culture was very similar. But in actual fact, what I realized that the American work culture is very different. And so that was a really steep learning curve, um, particularly in terms of what does meeting KPIs look like and being remunerated based on performance. From there, I actually went and worked at Regional Express Airlines in their startup year. And I went there as their general manager of marketing, which was fascinating. Fascinating to work for a startup airline. Not something that I would recommend in terms of work-life balance. It was a 7-day-a-week job and it was a stressful job. It was post-September 11, post-ANZAC collapse. So it was an interesting time. But also, if I thought that I had experienced egos in the financial services sector, nothing prepared me for the aviation sector. That was fascinating too, and a huge learning experience, particularly as a woman in the kind of that general manager level role in an organization like that, where there's lots of different powers in that structure. So that was interesting. Yeah.
At that time, like just thinking, oh my God, the time and the place. So to be in a startup in an industry that's known as a industry that loses money, the aviation industry, like is, notorious for that. And post September 11, that kind of seems like so not the place to be. And yet you were there. So yeah, that's really curious timing. Yeah.
It
That's
was really
really interesting.
interesting because so Regional Express was formed out of some of the assets of the ANZAC collapse. Some really clever people who were putting together a regional airline. But the commentary in the media at the time was, these guys won't be around after Christmas. So my job was to get people to buy seats in advance. To actually have faith that if they booked a ticket now, we'd still be flying in 3 weeks' time when they wanted to travel, or next month when they wanted to travel. And Christmas was a really tough time, that Christmas period, because with regional air travel, most of it is around business. People travel from regional airlines to major cities for health appointments. And that, of course, comes to a grind over that Christmas New Year period. So there's this month of time where no one was buying airline tickets. It was, and they're also competing against Qantas and those entrenched habits of consumers. It was a fascinating time, but I learnt a lot.
And as you say, like having the marketing role there when you're trying to get the right message out there in such challenging times, like that with the egos, as you said as well. It's kind of like the perfect storm, really, isn't it? Thinking about that though, what attributes or strengths do you think came to the fore for you at that time? You said you learned a lot, but what do you reckon it was about you that helped you deal with, not, it wasn't the perfect time and place, but what was it that got you through that?
Look, I think what I saw around me from the people I was working with was absolute commitment and clear about what the goal was, clarity around that, perseverance, the tenacity, were things that I saw in the people around me, and the dedication to the hard work. And then having an open mind, I think that was the other thing, having to pivot at short notice. That was something that I learned. Above all, it was a tenacity.
Yeah. Would you say that is a strength or a capability of yours?
Yes, I would. Not everything goes according to plan all the time. You allow yourself about 2 minutes to be annoyed, and then you're like, right, back on the horse and off we go.
That's why I'm pushing you on that one, because I think it absolutely is a strength of yours. When those kind of perfect storm crisis things happen, it's like really interesting to think about, what is it that got me through it? And what were my strengths? And when you were going through that list, then you said how everyone dealt with it. It was around perseverance and tenacity. But I actually think they're some of your strengths, things that you would have called on that are, we can debate the nature and nurture thing, but I think they are kind of natural in you, and you might have developed them over the years. Something like that probably helped, strengthen those particular skills and that open-minded approach to things. But I also love the fact that you learned to pivot way before the rest of us did, when we had to wait until COVID to pivot, but you were doing that back then. I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah.
So take us from that time, leaving a Regional Express. What came about there?
Leaving Regional Express was a redundancy. Really fascinating because my previous boss had actually helped me to negotiate my contract at Regional Express. So when I told her that I wanted to leave, she said, "Well, at least let me help you negotiate your contract because a startup airline is not really a secure job." So I had that. So redundancy came about, and the first person I called was my partner at the time, now husband. And I said, "Hey, guess what?" And look, the writing was on the wall. It was happening. It had been happening, for weeks beforehand, and other people in the organization. So I wasn't entirely upset to be leaving, to be honest. The second person I called was that previous manager, and I said, "You were right. Here I am without a job."
Yeah.
And she said, "Great. What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to go on holidays." And she said, "Awesome. And then would you like to come back?" So I did. And that was fun to go back and work in that organization again. But also interesting because in the year or so that I had been gone, it had also changed in focus. So it was really great to go back there. But I think I had changed.
Yeah,
I went
absolutely.
back with a different lens and a different perspective.
So there's a couple of things in there that I'd love to go into a little bit deeper, if that's all right with you. So the first one is around redundancy, because people will be listening to this episode and women are always looking for advice on time and place. And I think redundancy, it had a stigma back in the day. Becoming redundant was something that people had even some shame about. Oh my God, I've been made redundant. Whereas I remember I'd been at Westpac for 12 years. And like at the end for the last 3 years, I kept putting my hand up for redundancy because I'd done my 10 years and I was like, pick me. And it would never happen. And I was like, damn, why is this not going to happen? It would have been financially beneficial, but couldn't quite swing that. And I'm just curious about that concept of redundancy in terms of sometimes it actually is a good thing, right? It can be at the right time based on your own personal situation, of course. And if your redundancy happens in a way where you've also managed and continued your networks, that's what I like about your story. You'd stayed in contact with your old boss, so the opportunities were still there. So there's some wisdom in that as well.
Yeah, I think there absolutely was more stigma around redundancy
Mm.
20 odd years ago than there is now. But having said that, we still tie up so much of our self value in our jobs, which on reflection, our work is part of what we do and we should be proud of it and we should invest in it. But we are more than that.
Yeah.
Our person is more than just our work.
Mm.
And I often reflect on if I hadn't taken that role. So when I did resign from my job and go to the airline, I got a phone call from a fabulous man who worked in the company that I was working for, and he was based in Boston. And he rang me, and he's a tall man with an incredible presence, but an incredibly deep voice, and he uses silence with great
Mm.
effect. So whenever John rang, the temptation was to fill the silence. Anyway, when I got this role at Dress for Success, he was one of the first people to congratulate me
Ah,
and sent me a message via LinkedIn and said, I knew Sonia. I knew
yeah,
this would happen. But he offered me a role anywhere in the organization, anywhere in the world.
amazing.
And wherever you want to go, he said, "You want to come here to Boston? You can go to our San Francisco office. You can go wherever you want and we'll find you a job." And I said, "John, I've already given them my word.
Yeah,
I can't go back on that, but thank you."
yeah.
And I was there for only a year and I was made redundant. I often think if I had have made a different choice, where would I have gone? But in actual
Mm.
fact, it was through that opportunity that I met my husband. And I thought that's why I was meant to go there. I was meant to go to Rex for that reason. So I went back to financial services and then I got married and I moved to regional Australia, which was incredible. Moving from a city of 5 million people to a town of
Mm.
25,000 people was certainly a change. And I got married and moved to Griffith. And my boss said to me, "Well, there's no reason for you to have to leave your job. Why don't you just work remotely?" Now, this is 2005.
Oh,
So
wow.
well before COVID. So I would work from home one week and then I would come to Sydney and work from the office one week. And because my husband travelled for work a lot, so we'd split our time between Sydney and Griffith. And then, of course, children were on the cards and then you have to make some choices
Mm.
and flexibility becomes really important. So I started my own business in marketing because there weren't senior marketing roles in a small regional town. So I started my own business, which also gave me flexibility to work the hours that I wanted to work and work as much or as little as I wanted to for a while. And had a fantastic business partner who is still a dear friend. And we built a fantastic business with some fantastic staff members. And we were also employing women remotely, women working from home because they're living on farms and what have you, well before COVID. So when the pandemic came along, we were already set up for working from home and it was no big deal. But some of my proudest work moments were actually in that business. The night that I was in Melbourne and we won a national marketing award. I'm so proud of that because I think that oftentimes regional businesses are somehow seen not as professional or not as capable. But in actual fact, my experience has been that innovation and again, tenacity and the ability to seize an opportunity and act on it is absolutely the hallmarks of regional businesses. I was pretty proud to stand up on that stage and accept that award from a small regional business. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for a city girl working in global organization, traveling is your big thing. It must have been a big decision. I mean, obviously you're falling in love, so there's a good reason, but to move to a regional town, because Griffith is how far from Sydney? Like
600
if you had
kilometres.
yeah, so it's a big drive. Great that there's a regional airline and you can fly there. That's an upside, but that's a big change of lifestyle for you at that time and place. And as a girl who grew up in the country, I can totally relate. I grew up in a much smaller town, but it can be isolating if you don't know people, if you haven't grown up there. Regional areas or towns can sometimes be a little bit cliquey. So to fit in and find a place, and then for you to actually start a business, because, pre-kids, like, got to do something with my time and bring that skill set to town. So that entrepreneurial spirit was obviously there as well. That fitted and made sense at that time and place. And as you said, lots of women, like that flexibility we need when we have kids. So it's another stage and part of the journey.
Yeah, I think I was really conscious of that transition. There's some things that were a huge surprise to me, like shops closing at lunchtime on a Saturday, reopening till Sunday morning.
Mm,
It was like, what do people do on the weekend? But then I realized actually that shopping for entertainment is not a great way of using your time, but actually spending time with your friends and doing all these other things is so much more fun. I was really conscious when I moved to Griffith that I didn't just want to be known as that's Adrian's wife. I wanted to be myself. And I knew that what you put in, you get out. And so if I was going to have a full and happy life living there, because you're right about regional
yeah.
areas, they're friendly people, but most people have grown up together. So they don't need
Mm,
full friends. I was lucky that one of my uni friends lived there. So she married one of my husband's friends, but I really set out to build a network of my own, particularly
mm,
in the business community. And that was really fantastic. And I stepped into my first board role there as well.
mm,
For a couple of reasons. One, because it was a tourism role, so I had some relevant experience, but also because I have a tendency to enjoy detail. That's my natural place is actually in
mm,
the detail. And knowing that I wanted to develop more strategic thinking and bigger picture thinking, that a board role was going to help
mm.
that. But then also
Yeah.
just meeting fantastic, clever people who I
Mm.
may not come across working for myself.
That's another really good piece of advice that you've just shared. That idea that when you were there and that it was your first opportunity for a board role. So finding a board role that aligned to your experience, your business experience in tourism. Obviously, you have your undergrad in tourism and then you'd had experience in the travel industry. So a board role with that kind of remit completely makes sense. But what I liked about what you shared there about the time and the place for you was realizing that detail is that's your natural style, which makes me smile because you know what I'm going to say. I still remember in your interview that you said, I'm one of those people who likes to dot the I's and cross the T's. And I was like, yes, she likes detail. That was at the time something that was important for our organization. But I like the fact that you knew that about yourself. And so the idea of getting onto a board wasn't about getting it onto your CV. You really wanted to challenge yourself around building your strategic capability. And I think that's another, great piece of wisdom and advice for people that are listening to this about thinking about what you want to do, where you want to do it, and why. What's the growth piece for you in that as well? So how long were you in Griffith for?
Lived in Griffith for 17 years and absolutely love it. Um, so what changed was COVID changed a lot of things.
Mhm.
My husband's role changed, and it was kind of a bit of a bucket list thing for both of us to have an adult gap year. And so we packed up the kids and we went and lived in Italy for a year. And
Amazing.
that was a lot of fun. So that was 2022. And I had sold my share in the business to my business partner and took a year off, and we went and lived in northern Italy. So I was able to work by contracting back to her for some time, which was a really nice transition out of the business, nice for the team, nice for our clients, that it wasn't an abrupt
Mm.
end to the relationship, which was lovely for me. We lived in Italy for a year. The kids went to school there. My husband and I both worked, and we ate our weight in pasta every
So a
week.
couple, yeah. So a couple of things for people that might be listening now. How old were the boys when you decided to take them away for a year?
When we went over there, they were 12 and 14. So I had one in the last year of primary school and one in the second year of high school.
Yep.
So they were old enough to enjoy the experience and to be able to learn from the experience, but not old enough that they couldn't come with us and say no.
Yeah. And people will gather from your surname that you may have Italian heritage, which you do. Adrian does as well, right?
Yes, he does. Yeah.
Excellent. So, what language skills amongst the four of you? Where were you at to go and live in Italy for a year?
I speak Italian quite fluently, although I do speak Italian with an Australian accent, which my cousins laugh all the time. My husband also speaks Italian, but he speaks his dialect. So he's from near Venice, so the Veneto region. So he speaks a dialect, but from the 1950s, because that's when his father left Italy. So he gets laughed at too a little bit. The kids have no Italian at all. So when we went there, we made the decision to put them into an international school. So they did do all their lessons in English, which was great because it meant that they didn't miss any school when we came back to Australia. So they learned some Italian and a lot about the Italian culture while we were over there.
What a great experience to have as a family coming out of COVID, to have that time, travel's your thing. Italy comes to an end
Yes.
and you return to Australia. What comes next?
So while we were in Italy, that was my opportunity. That was my thinking time. And it was absolutely put aside for that. It was what's next for me. And that was when I realized with long walks and a few runs and a bit of hiking in the mountains and lots of conversations with my husband about what did I want to do next. And I realized actually that what I loved was running the business. It was great. I loved that idea of moving the organization forward. But also I realized I wanted to do something purposeful, not for profit. Gender equity has been a theme through my time in the workplace. I have come across biases and discrimination and barriers just in day-to-day work. So I said, right, so when I go back to Australia, what I'd really like is a general management type role in the for purpose sector. And if it has something to do with women, that's the cherry on top. And here I am at Dress for Success.
That's purposeful and intentional. So, Sonia, what you were saying about when you were in Italy, it was that thinking time, and you got really intentional about what is it and got that clarity about what is next for you. So, when you have that clarity, do you think the universe does kind of bring in or you become more aware of those opportunities?
I think you set yourself a path, and then if you have that clarity, that path becomes clearer and you realize what you have to do. And then who can help you along the way? Partly it is timing, and some of that is chance and luck and what have you. It's actually the first time in my career where I've actually purposely taken the time to think and decide what to next. Whereas everything has come to me and then I've gone, oh, yes, I'll do that, rather than me saying, this is what I want and
Mm.
going out finding that. I have to say it was a bit uncomfortable because for the first 6 months, I didn't have that clarity and it was a little bit scary. It's like, here I am, I'm 50. What next? Like, what am I going to do next? What is going to fulfill me? What is going to excite me and keep me getting out of bed in the morning? So it was a little bit scary for a few months there. But once I got really clear, it was actually really nice. And then it was like a matter of now we're on the implementation part. But we did make the decision
Yeah.
to move back to Sydney while we were in Italy as well. And that
Yeah.
was partly to be closer to my family. You know, my parents were getting a bit older and that sort of thing. So my husband also, his work was more based in Sydney and he didn't want to commute anymore. And I think that's fantastic because as the boys get older, it's really important for them to have really good role models around and, you know, their dad's a role model. So it was great for him to be home. So it kind of made sense for us to move to Sydney.
Yeah, the time and the place was the right place, right time. I think that situation you're talking about, getting clarity, and then it's like, is it luck? Does everything come together at the right time? And I think there's something in that for us when we've got the clarity. It seems like the opportunities come our way. There is a part of our brain called our reticular activating system that actually does play a role here as well. So when we do get clarity, then we see more of the opportunities. We're
Yeah.
more aware of them. So I think there is a bit of a science to it as well. And your example there, sharing that a lot of the other jobs in your career had come your way. Or is this the first time that you went, what do I want? And we often talk about it at Explore in terms of, have you been in the passenger seat of your career, which a lot of us are in the early years? It's like saying yes is great. So someone says, what about
Yeah.
this? Yeah, that sounds like me. And there's this point where we can hopefully have the foresight, the desire, the clarity, the courage to get out of the passenger seat and kind of go, okay, I'm in the driver's seat. There's my steering wheel. We get to choose the car, whatever it is, and we get to choose the speed, right?
Yeah.
But it's so important to be behind the wheel of your own car and working out where you want to go.
Yeah, you're right. It does take courage because as soon as you say, this is what I want, and you go looking for that, there's the opportunity to fail, to not
Yeah.
meet what you said you're going to do, like to set a goal and not meet it. So that actually takes courage versus saying, oh, I'm just going to look for a job and then wait to see
Mm.
what comes along. Then, you haven't really set a goal other than just to get a job. So you can actually take whatever it is that comes along. The other thing about not having a job is that everyone asks you. We came back to Australia and moved to Sydney. So I got the kids settled in school and then my dad passed away. And so it was great timing that I didn't have a job. So I could be there to support my mum and what have you. But then, time passes and then it's like, right, no, now I'm going to do this. But yeah, people ask you all the time, oh, have you found a job yet? Or are you working yet? Or, and it's the yet part.
And it's the yet part, right? Yeah. So the judgment piece and the assessment piece that falls in that, which we do really need to let go of, like it just doesn't serve anyone well. And even language, like people often ask me when they've been made redundant or they're not working, like in coaching sessions, they'll say, what sort of language, how do I describe it? And I'm like, oh, it's so disappointing that we have to find language that feels comfortable because for the person that's in that situation, they're feeling the stress of job search, especially if they're more mature. It is not easy getting a new role and navigating the job market today, but the language around describing it. And we want to be vulnerable enough to say, yeah, I'm looking for work at the moment. Like, I'm looking for work. If you hear of anything, this is what I'm looking for. That takes a lot of courage and bravery and clarity. Or the phrase that, I'm a bit of a fan of when people feel uncomfortable with it, which is I'm between roles at the moment, which kind of means I haven't got a job and I'm looking for
Yeah.
one. But that came to an end with the job search thing when you were hired and employed as the CEO of Dress for Success.
Yes.
Tell us about what the last 2 years have been like in that role.
It's been one of the most challenging things I've done and also one of the most rewarding things I've done. I can
Yeah.
experience both of those
Yeah.
things in 5 minutes.
Mm.
I think what that looks like is, there's a few things. I think one, actually working for a not-for-profit organisation is really different. There's so many more considerations that hadn't
Yeah.
actually thought about. The learning curve from the kind of the structural perspective and the sector. I think what was fantastic was actually after the first year went around and seeing everything for the second time was
Yeah.
great. That first year, sometimes I felt like every phone call and every email that popped into my inbox was something new that I was going to have to figure out how to deal with it. Whereas now, I've done everything once, so the second time around is a bit easier. The women we serve, though, that is truly the piece. This is absolutely why I chose this sort of role, and that has been the greatest reward without a doubt. The vulnerability, the courage that women show to step through our front door.
So for
Because
those who don't know about Dress for Success, what exactly does Dress for Success do as a charity? What's the service for the clients that you're talking about?
Right. So the purpose of Dress for Success is to empower women to achieve financial mobility. That's the goal.
Mm.
But we do that by supporting women who are entering and re-entering the workforce, but also throughout their entire work career as well. The key service is providing clothing for a woman who's going for a job interview or who's starting new employment. And the clothing is about being able to wear something appropriate in that moment and taking away some of those biases that women experience when they step into a job interview or step into new employment, because we want them to look like they belong there and they're dressed for that role. But more importantly, the clothes are the external part. But more importantly, we talk about this a lot. It's actually how the clothes make her feel and what the clothing gives back to her in terms of her own self-worth, her own self-esteem, her confidence, her willingness to take that step, to be brave enough to apply for the job, to walk into a room and know that she belongs there. You know, that all comes from within. So the clothing is what you put on the outside, but actually how does that
Yeah.
make you feel? And that is the transformational part. And
Yeah.
it's incredible. It's incredible.
Amazing. So even the work that you're doing now and what Dress for Success does helps those women when it's her time to find her next place of employment. And how they do that is through that support, the service. As you said, a lot of volunteers involved in that, a lot of women involved in helping other women with meeting that time and place for their future and independence. So it sounds like you have been on this trajectory into this kind of a role. It's 2 years now. You've just shared your career and life journey with us. When you look back, who have been the people that come to mind as supporters of you? Who's helped you on this pathway?
Oh gosh, there have been so many. There have been so many people along the way. I have been so fortunate to have worked for some incredible women in my early career. My very first job out of uni, I worked for a fantastic woman called Maggie, and she gave me my first job, and I think my pay was about $10,800 per annum as a junior travel consultant.
Wow.
But Maggie again gave me the next job and the next job and the next job after that.
Mm.
So she was really supportive and gave me lots of opportunities to progress through the organization. And in actual fact, I saw her for coffee only a couple of years ago. So this is
Yeah.
30 years on. And she said that she had hoped that I would take over from her one day, which was the most beautiful
Lovely.
compliment. But you know, she taught me lots of things. It was my first professional role, and she taught me a lot about networking and a lot about people doing business with people they like and actually
Yeah.
the benefit of being interested in people. So Maggie, and then after that, Karen, who was my manager in financial services, she was the person who made me feel uncomfortable about talking about money. She said,
Yep.
as women, we don't talk about money enough. We don't talk about salary. We don't ask for enough. We don't negotiate enough. And every year when it came to salary negotiation time, she made me do it. And I'm really grateful to her for that.
Really wise feedback and a wise advice. So anyone that's listening, that is really key piece of feedback for women. It is one of the many components that make up the gender pay gap that we have that sits universally, but here in Australia, it sits out at about 17, 18,
Yeah.
20%, depending on your industry. And being able to negotiate out your salary is a key part that you can take hold of and grab hold of. So just going to pick up on that point there. Anyone else that comes to mind, Sonia, as a supporter in the journey?
Um, yes, my husband. When I moved to Griffith, he knew my career took a turn that wasn't planned, and he was always really conscious of that because it enabled him to continue his and enabled us to have a family. And he said, when this role comes to an end, he said it will be your time.
Mm.
And so there you go.
Yeah. So that's what I was wondering because I have met Adrian and I feel like there's a time once where he did say to me something like it's his turn to be the handbag, something like that. I think he may have used that
He
particular
did.
quote, which I
He
always
did.
love, right? He has said
He
that. Yeah.
used that, and he used that because the wonderful Sir Nick Shahady said that to him one day too. He
Yeah.
said Dame Murray Bashir supported him in his career for such a long time. And when she became Governor of New South Wales, he said it was his turn to be her handbag. And Adrian said to him at that time, he said, one day I'll do the same for Sonia.
Yeah. That's perfect that he has made space for this to be her time and her place. And I hope that it feels like this is a really special time for you and an amazing role that you currently have.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible. It's an incredible organisation. I feel the responsibility. Dress for Success New South Wales and ACT has been operating for 16 years and founded by some incredible women who have worked tirelessly and given so much of themselves. Amanda, you included, you've been with the organisation on the board for 10 years and given so much of yourself, your experience, your time, your generosity, all these things. So I feel this deep responsibility to keep this organisation moving forward. And so 16 years from now, it'll be in even better shape. So my little part is to carry this organisation forward and do something for it, but also the deep responsibility for the people who support the work we do. So our donors, our corporate partners, the grant funders, etc. There's a real sense of responsibility. So do I feel like this is my moment? I'm not so sure. This is just my little opportunity to contribute.
I would think it's a bit bigger than little. You talked before about how much different not-for-profits are, and they absolutely are. I speak with a lot of women who are from a commercial corporate background. They'll say, my next role, I'm going to leave corporate and go into not-for-profit and give back. And I think they think it's going to be easy. Like they think, because I'll be giving them something that they need. I've got all this skill, all this experience. I've had this big career. I'm a whatever profession they come from. And now I'm going to gift that to a not-for-profit. And number one, not-for-profits don't necessarily always need someone that's got 100% of their background, just as corporate. It's really important to have some other aspects and other experiences in your life to round that out a little bit. And your commercial experience will not be enough for you to successfully come at that GM or CEO level of a not-for-profit. Like there's so many other aspects that are different from corporate. So that thing that you talked about earlier about getting some board experience beforehand, broadening out your community, having broader lived experience is so important. If you're curious and thinking about the not-for-profit space, I would really encourage people to think about that, because I think Sonia's story certainly supports that. And in your case right now, you are the steward of the organisation by the end of the year 17-year mark, and 2029 Dress for Success New South Wales and ACT is going to be 20 years old. Like I'd like to think that you're still at the helm in 3 years' time as the CEO. As we hit 20 and celebrate that. I'm not even going to think about how old I'm going to be then, God, but it's going to be a special time. So when we look out to that future, but there's something really lovely about that legacy as well. And I think that a lot of the volunteers at Dress for Success would talk about for themselves that it is her time and her place. They love coming to Dress for Success, right? As volunteers in their time and place are meeting women who are the clients at her time and her place. So I love seeing that energy. Also seems appropriate that we talk about this today because it is actually National Volunteers Week. And this afternoon, you and I are going to be hanging out together to be thanking all of our Dress for Success volunteers for all that they do for the organisation as we celebrate this on an annual basis. But for today, Sonia, I want to say a very, very big thank you to you for sharing your story. I found out more about you that I didn't know, and more about your story, which is always the goal. But more importantly, it was great to get your insights on time and place and the opportunities that you saw, the ones that you took, the decisions that you made that might be a sideways step, or, really big changes in life, like, city girl heads country, and through to fulfilling your goal of working in a purpose-driven organisation. Thank you so much for sharing generously with us today. Folks, I hope you've really enjoyed this episode. There will be another one every week on a Friday. You'll be hearing from awesome women like Sonia. So thanks for joining us for Her Time, Her Place.